A rare severe weather event will be coming to the United States today, and this is going to pose a threat for multiple tornadoes, damaging winds, and even some large hail anywhere from the Ohio Valley back into the Northeast. In addition to this, we're going to be watching for an active weather pattern as we go into the beginning of the work week, where more severe weather will be a possibility in areas like the Midwest. So in today's forecast, we're going to break down everything that you need to know about these severe weather events for you. Let's begin with what's happening right now across the United States, which right now we actually have a large complex of showers and thunderstorms that moved across the Midwest yesterday, and we ended up having 3 or 4 different large tornadoes back over in southern and central Wisconsin. Areas like Janesville got hit hard, and obviously if you know anybody in the south side of Janesville, please make sure that they're doing okay. Did have a large tornado there last night, and unfortunately it looks like there's a pretty good amount of damage there. All this activity is now pushing to the east with a weakening line of showers and thunderstorms that's now moving across parts of Ohio and Indiana. And eventually, as we go later into today, this low pressure system will start to move more to the east, and we are eventually going to get a rare severe weather event with tornadoes in parts of New England. And I'll tell you why it's rare here in just a second. In addition to this, we'll have a chance for severe weather all the way through areas like Arkansas and into the Ohio Valley, where a bit more of a lower risk for severe weather will exist, but there will be a chance for at least some damaging winds, hail, and maybe an isolated tornado. Now, back over in the southeast, we did have Invest 92L just go into parts of Georgia yesterday morning, and that actually was able to bring some showers and thunderstorms to the area. There's actually still some spin here, but it's not expected to develop into anything. So at this point, just some showers and storms mostly for those near Georgia and Florida, with some higher wave heights offshore. We still have a system that might develop in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. This could be our next tropical storm. As of right now, it is expected to crash into Mexico, where impacts to the United States do not look very likely, aside from parts of South Texas. Now, today's severe weather event is going to be a pretty large area that extends anywhere from New England, including Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, all of New England basically under some risk of severe weather, all the way back into parts of the Ohio Valley and even into the Mississippi Valley, where damaging winds, large hail, and a few tornadoes will be a possibility. Right now, there is an enhanced risk across parts of New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, New York, and even a sliver of Maine. You might be wondering, what is so rare about this severe weather event? Well, this is the first time in 6 years that we've had a 10% tornado risk in New England, and it's also the first time ever that there was a 10% tornado risk issued on a day 2 outlook, which happened yesterday, where we do have a 10% probability within a 25-mile radius of tornadoes, which is an enhanced risk-driven tornado risk and as well as wind risk back over in those areas. So just in case you needed some sort of proof that this event is really rare, this is the day 2 outlooks over the last several years, beginning back in March of 2020, when day 2 outlooks were able to have individual probabilities. And notice this is the only 10% tornado risk that we've had in New England that's been issued on a day 2 outlook. Now, obviously, this is rare and all, and it's obviously rare for the Storm Prediction Center. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see a definite tornado outbreak today, but obviously it is pointing towards signs that we could see some sort of small-scale tornado outbreak today. In addition to that, obviously, all these areas have at least experienced some sort of day 2 tornado outlook back from the Midwest into parts of the Dixie Alley, which is actually a very common occurrence. But with all that said, the severe weather risk, again, is quite a large area today from the Mississippi Valley back into the Northeast, where damaging winds, hail, and a few tornadoes will be a possibility. We are planning on being live today, so make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified when we do go live. The wind threat for today is primarily centered across parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, but we could still have damaging winds really anywhere in any of these risk areas. So just make sure you're hatching down trampolines and make sure that you're protecting loose lawn items today. Tornado risk, as I mentioned before, is a bit of a rare one. We have that 10% tornado risk back over New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Vermont, and extreme eastern New York and extreme western Maine. And for the record, this actually did grow a bit from yesterday. They have expanded the 10% tornado risk a bit further down to the south to include areas now in parts of southwestern and even southern Massachusetts. Now, going into Monday, we have another risk for severe weather, and this one could also equally be pretty significant, but in a different way. Right now, we do have a large, slight, and marginal risk across a large chunk of the northern plains and the Midwest, where the greatest concentration for severe weather will be in Minnesota and as well as back over in northwestern Wisconsin. Now, why is this significant? Well, right now it is a conditional slight risk. It'll probably get upgraded to an enhanced risk for damaging winds, which right now it is a slight risk, but that could get upgraded in a future outlook depending on confidence. In addition to that, the hail threat has also grown across parts of Minnesota, where we could see the potential for significant hail that's exceeding 2 inches in diameter. Could even see some hailstones upwards of the size of apples as we go into Monday. Tornado risk risk right now is a low-end tornado risk, but I wouldn't be surprised if this got upgraded as well. It just depends on trends, because convection may be ongoing in the morning. That could stabilize the atmosphere for a large chunk of the afternoon and evening, which could kind of hinder any sort of redevelopment during the late day, which is when we're looking at for the primed setup for severe weather. So today's severe weather setup does feature some pretty high significant tornado parameter values across parts of the Northeast this afternoon. Notice any of these kind of cyan color areas and yellow color areas, those are going to represent really where our greatest risks for tornadoes will be today. We have very nicely curved hodographs, which means that there's a lot of spin in the atmosphere. There's also quite a bit of bulk shear. So we have a really favorable environment today for a few tornadoes, as long as storms can really just get going, which I think they will today. I think we're going to have at least a few supercells that do produce the potential for tornadoes. Here's the updraft helicity from 0 to 3 kilometers. Kind of gives you an idea of where there will be rotating supercells today. The HRRR model kind of paints a picture where the greatest chance for those rotating supercells will be, predominantly across Vermont and New Hampshire, and also maybe even into the hill country back over parts of Massachusetts. We also could see an isolated tornado or two in other areas like Pennsylvania, even Connecticut or Rhode Island, and even Western Maine could also see an isolated tornado or two, but the risk overall should remain a bit lower in those areas. So here's the timing for today. Showers will continue with some elevated thunderstorms this morning across New England, all the way back into parts of Ohio. Main concern, some small hail and gusty winds and some lightning. By the time we get closer to lunchtime, storms will start to fire up in New York, and eventually as they enter into a more primed environment for tornadoes, they will start to rotate a bit more. So once they get closer to Vermont and the very far extreme eastern parts of New York, we'll probably eventually start to get tornado warnings and tornadic supercells as early as 12 to 1 o'clock. So make sure that you're staying weather aware. By 2 to 3 o'clock, those storms are moving across New Hampshire and as well as Vermont. If we start to see these Boeing segments develop quite early in the day, this could become more of a wind threat as we get closer to 4 to 5 o'clock. So there is a chance that we start to transition really quickly into a wind concern. If storms can stay discrete for longer periods of time, though, that is when we're going to be watching for that greatest tornado threat. By the time we get closer to 6, 7 o'clock, those storms are moving into parts of eastern New Hampshire, back into eastern Massachusetts, and as well as southern Maine, where damaging winds will be the main concern, and eventually after that, storms are moving offshore, and we're done with this severe weather risk. Back further to the south, we'll also be watching for some pop-up showers and thunderstorms. Any storms that maintain staying discrete could also produce the potential for an isolated tornado. Now, honestly, with today's setup, I kind of mentioned this as well yesterday. I don't really feel super confident that we're going to see a full-blown tornado outbreak, but I do think a few tornadoes are at least a possibility. With the most recent computer model data, I'm not super confident, again, that we're even going to see that many tornadoes, but I do think there's at least a chance for a few tornadoes in at least Vermont and New Hampshire, where any discrete cells that stay maintained will produce the potential for tornadoes. Back over in the Ohio Valley and as well as Kentucky, that line of storms will weaken as we go throughout the morning. By the afternoon, storms fire up in Ohio, Kentucky, and even back over into parts of Tennessee. Any storms that develop will be mostly hail and wind driven. I don't really expect much of a tornado risk down here, but maybe a brief tornado in Kentucky. I just don't think it's really going to be much. By the time we go into the evening hours, a few more storms will try to fire back over in Arkansas and western Tennessee. That remains a bit more uncertain. More capping is a bit more of an issue over there, and eventually into Monday, we are clearing out across those areas. Now, over in the northern plains for Minnesota, we will have some storms likely blowing up sometime around about 5 to 7 o'clock tomorrow. This is still a bit more conditional depending on the morning convection, so stay tuned, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and we'll have another update for you tomorrow on this particular event. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to hit the like button down below and subscribe if you've not already.